there are a number of regulations, and the regulations are only as good as the enforcing arm behind it. I also have an original memorandum from the Georgia Department of Human Resources, which is our governing body, that states that they realized that there were some criminal violations that were detected in these clinics as well during their routine inspections. However, because they are not given the authority to act upon criminal codes, it basically has to be dismissed, and there is no action taken. So it does the rules and regulations vary widely from state to state. Most of them are in name only, and unless we begin to push our legislators and say we want some accountability for the agencies that are responsible for inspecting abortion clinics, you're really not going to see a change. You can write laws all day long that make people feel good and give you a warm, cozy feeling, but if there's no enforcement, there is no law.
The doctors that we use were primarily physicians who were starting out in practice and would do abortions to earn enough money until they had their own private practice going. Or they were physicians who didn't have such a hot practice and used working in abortion clinics to pay for their medical malpractice insurance, which especially for OBGYNs, is extremely high all across the country.
Incomplete abortions, those happen very, very frequently. I kept a file in my office that was separate. It was under lock and key, and absolutely no one had access to that but me. Those were our problem patients. Those were pulled out. They were purged from the normal filing system because we did not want an inspector to come in and routinely pull records and pull those records. Those were the women that we knew we sent home bleeding. They were the women that we knew we sent home with a problem. They were the ones that we knew we were going to hear from again. You see, when I came to the clinic, we did have a complication log book. Well, I asked the staff, I said, would you explain to me, how do you gather the data for your statistics? They said, well, we guess. I said, okay. You guess at how many patients have complications after an abortion. So I tell you this because when you stop and look at CDC statistics, other statistics that you are going to come across that show just how safe legal abortion is, you need to understand who reports those statistics. I have a memorandum that came from our national director of this particular company, and in that memorandum she states, you do not report it if it's not a hospitalization. I don't care how many times you perforate a uterus, you pack them, you massage the uterus, you give them some Ergotrate, and you send them home, but you don't report it.
The average clinic worker does not know that there are medical malpractice suits against the clinic where she works. Planned Parenthood does not encourage talk of complications or mistakes. Planned Parenthood workers are not informed of the injuries and deaths that happen at clinics within the same affiliate.
One incident in particular, when I was working in the clinic, we had a young girl. She was actually 14 years of age. And this particular doctor came in to me and he said, Helen, I perforated her uterus and I pulled the bowel through. What do I do? I knew what he meant. He wasn't asking me what he should do as a doctor. He was asking me, what do I do to make sure that this stays under wraps? So the decision was made. Poke it back in and send her home. Because I'm going to tell you something, life or death means nothing in a clinic. If you do not respect the life of the unborn, how can you respect the life of the mother, and why? It doesn't happen.
So I was looking at these babies as something to be disposed of. I didn't see them as important. I didn't see life as important. I didn't value my own life, therefore how could I value anybody else's life? And if these women were stupid enough to get pregnant, then it's their fault. And that's how I felt. And That was how a majority of the staff felt.
Whether she lived or died, I do not know. And I wish I could stand here and even tell you that I cared, but I didn't. Because you see, I wasn't there to care about women. I knew that in the abortion clinic, there are women exploiting women, and I was one of them. There are a lot of things that go on in a clinic that you would not tolerate if it happened in any other branch of medicine. And I say that speaking as one who is still in the medical industry. But it's important that you understand to what lengths people in the industry will go to preserve their image. There is nothing that is too low. I say this because I want you to understand that when I worked in the industry, there were no delusions of helping anyone. I helped myself to the money. I helped myself to a position of power, and I didn't care how many dead bodies I had to crawl over to get there. I walked in the laboratory every day. I saw dead babies every day for 3 years. I played with many of them. I never saw a human life, and I never cared. If I could see 50, I was so happy. Because you know what? That meant I was really going to have a good bonus in my next paycheck.
The testimonies you have just heard clearly beg a question. While the abortion providers claim that the welfare of women is their principal concern, do they really tell their patients the truth? Let's take a look at some common practices inside the so-called safe, legal abortion clinics.
I was convinced that pro-choice was indeed the best thing for women. I began to work more with organizations like Planned Parenthood, NARAL and NAF on certain projects, and began to learn even more. I was issuing birth control pills after an abortion, and this is where I learned the real business, the real work of the abortion industry.
I was writing to National Now, and I would ask them for all their literature, and of course abortion was a big part of it. And I didn't think about it much at first, but little by little you begin to accept it all. You take a little bit of their lies, and it's like, you know, an enormous, I don't know, jigsaw puzzle type thing, but it definitely got all hooked together, and you had to accept the whole ball of wax. You couldn't just do away with one part of it.
I would be able to counsel a woman and say, all right, we don't want you to have to go through this procedure again. We want to get you started on birth control pills. We'll give you your first packet free. By the way, because the pharmaceutical companies, they gave it to us free. It's a good marketing. So we can distribute one pack free, write a prescription for 5 months worth. Everybody makes out.
Some of the directors I worked with had 8 and 9 abortions. And we're the same people that would look down on these women because they would come in for repeat abortions. How stupid can you get, you know?
Now, the pharmaceutical companies and the Planned Parenthoods and the abortion industries were not stupid. They knew that the less dose of estrogen in those pills, the more likely it was they were going to fail. But you don't have to worry. We can bring you right back for another abortion. So they even use percentages, by the way, 30% failure rate. 30% failure rate because we're going to use the real low estrogen pill, and so that means 30% of you will come back. And if we forget to tell you, by the way, if you get a flu, if it's in the season, the winter season, and you get a cold and you have to be put on antibiotics, the chemical reaction between the birth control pill and the antibiotic renders the birth control worthless. and totally ineffective. So we have another 20%, thank you, that'll come back around.
Every time she'd come in for an abortion or a D&E, we'd stamp, 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 stamp. Some of these charts were filled up on both sides. And the doctor would take a look at them and go, gee, if she tries real hard, she can come in again before Christmas. And this is somebody who cares about women? I don't think so.
The saddest emotional complications of abortion are the young women who come back for repeat abortions.
And of course, we're going to get you on some medication for that venereal disease. And of course, that and the birth control pill, well, we know what the antibiotics do. Bingo, we have another 10-15% coming back around. Thank you.
I had a couple friends in high school who had had abortions, and I had a pregnancy scare myself when I was an adolescent, and that was the first thing that came to my mind. I never thought of having the baby. I just took it as the general population does, that it is a choice, and unfortunately it's often presented as the only choice.
And now we're going to go into the schools, and now we're going to teach safe sex, because we care about you, we care about women. So basically what they're doing today is they're going into the schools and they're saying, kids, we know you're going to have sex, and we want you to understand, we understand that, and that's okay. It means, of course, that 2 or 3 or 4 of you are going to die. But if you use our condoms, and if you use our birth control methods, and if you practice safer sex, only 3 or 4 or 5 of you will die. The rest of you will live. Or, of course, about 30% will still contract a disease, but we'll take care of it, folks.
You see, we did work from a typed script. But because we understood that if we could gain control of that conversation immediately, and then we could start telling her a little about us, what we're saying to her is, I care about you. I am in control. I am the adult. I've done this before. I am the answer to your problem, no matter what it is. It was a very, it was sales. It was a marketing tool.
I often saw women who had been injured emotionally by abortion. However, my supervisor told me if she's having a problem after her abortion, it's because she was having a problem before her abortion.
I had one counselor, though, who approached me and said, I'd like to start a post-abortion syndrome counseling session. Well, of course, I said, we can't do that because there is no such thing as post-abortion syndrome. This is a counselor who was hearing from a lot of hurting women. But I quickly set her straight. I don't know where you got your statistics, but they are wrong. There is no such thing. If a woman calls you and says, I feel terrible, I'm hurting, I'm empty, something's wrong, we were trained to tell her, if you had a problem, you had it before you had the abortion. It has nothing to do with it. Now, if you need our services again, feel free to call us back. Otherwise, you need to speak to someone else.
One of the things that kept bothering me, even during the time that I was head nurse of the clinic, is why it was such an emotional trauma for a woman and such a difficult decision for a woman to make. If it was a natural thing to do, if it was right, why was it so difficult? I had to ask myself that all the time. I asked myself, too, I counseled these women so well. They were so sure of their decision. Why are they coming back after me now, months and years later? Psychological wrecks.
A woman would call, and I'd make her feel that this was her choice and that we were going to support her in this choice, because the women are looking for someone to support their decision.